Hello and a very warm welcome to the brand new edition of To The Point. I'm Kriti Mishra. And on today's show, my guest is Housing and Urban Affairs and Civil Aviation Minister, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri. Mr. Puri, welcome to Rajya Sabha TV and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Minister, we'll elicit your views on a wide gamut of issues, but first let's talk about metro services. Now, these services have resumed since September 7th in a calibrated approach, in a phased manner. But once all the corridors are thrown open for the passengers, what kind of challenges that you foresee?
One faces challenges in the time of a pandemic like this, which is one of a kind. We've dealt with SARS, Ebola, H1N1, and we took them in our stride. This has caused disruption and dislocation of a very different kind. I think the closest that you can think of is the Spanish flu, which took place in the immediate aftermath of the First World War. So there are challenges. Because the Prime Minister was able to effect a lockdown which was comprehensive and, if I may be permitted to use it, a lockdown which is quite severe, and economic activity for a while came to a complete grinding halt. We were able to avert many things that could have gone wrong. We bought time, produced the infrastructure which was required to deal with the pandemic, hospital beds, the production of H1, the N95 masks, the production of PPE kits, ventilators, etc. Now, when we decided to effect the lockdown, we were clear in our minds that it was not going to be a lockdown in perpetuity. Obviously, there will come a time when you have to make a determination that the time has come now to restore economic activity. And we started allowing people to move to their places of work, etc. Metro or urban transport on a large scale, and metro, that is a lifeline of a city. On an average, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, on a good day, the metro would carry 6 million passengers in Delhi. Delhi accounts for about 389 kilometers out of a total metro framework in excess of 700 kilometers in the country. 6 million passengers in a day, 6.5 million on a day which with particularly high numbers. Now, when we opened, we were clear in our minds that there has to be a system inbuilt into the opening of mutual confidence building. The commuter must have a sense of confidence that he or she can undertake the journey in conditions which are as safe as possible. I had the same experience when we opened civil aviation, and I can come to that in a minute. So the opening is graded. You use the word calibrated, Kriti. We started on the 7th, and by the 12th, all the lines will be open. We started with something like 15 to 18,000 passengers on the first day. On the second day, we were in excess of 50,000, and I expect the number to rise with the opening of different lines. I do not expect the number to reach pre-COVID highs. Like, I don't think we will reach that 5 million, 6 million, or 50 lakhs or 60 lakhs. That will require that mutual confidence building and that trust which develops between the provider of a service and the consumer of that service to start trusting each other. And the numbers will go up. I was asked on the first day by one of your colleagues, are you disappointed that the numbers were only 15,000? And my response, which I can share with you, is no. I said, I'm delighted that the numbers are low to begin with, because if you had a very major rush, we would have strained the system. The way we are going about it is the systems are in place, trains are being sanitized, metro station arrangements are in place, last mile connectivity issues are also being looked at, e-rickshaws, etc. And I think it's proceeding as per plan. I am confident, as I was in the case of domestic civil aviation and Vande Bharat, that if your good SOPs are in place and you are able to project to the consumer of the service, the commuter in this case, that those systems are designed and will endure. This, I have absolutely no worry. I think when we reach the 12th of September, maybe we can have a chat a few days later to make an assessment. But this is a journey. We have just got off the mark, as it were, where we started, and now we are into a few days of that. As we proceed, we are ready to review. When I made the initial announcement about the commencement of the metro, not only for Delhi but most parts of India, with the exception of Maharashtra, I had said that we don't have preconceived ideas. If during the course of the journey between the 7th and the 12th, we have to do some course correction, if we find, for instance, when a lot of lines open up and we are on the verge of full opening, that we need to maybe factor in some new developments, we're happy to do that. So we're doing it with a sense of responsibility and with caution being the underlined term.
All right, so you're ready to review, and also the fact that the frequency of the trains would be regulated to avoid overcrowding both at the stations and on the trains. But what about the air conditioning system?
The air conditioning system in all these, whether it's an aircraft or a metro, is in fact very conducive. It is designed, in effect. I asked the chairman of the Delhi Metro Corporation, DMRC, I said, what would be the, because I'm a minister who likes to go into this detail. He said the idea is to keep it at 26 degrees, which is taking into account the outside temperature. Leave the doors at the metro station open for a little longer, and so that fresh air and ventilation takes place. Also, when you are when the train turns around, you disinfect it. So I think those systems are in place.
All right, so moving
Both
ahead,
the air conditioning and ventilation system. Those are in fact designed specifically. We didn't anticipate a virus then, but you could say that they were actually designed. Same thing happens in an aircraft, where the nozzle is on the roof. You open it, the air comes, it goes through the floor, gets cleaned and is recycled back. So you have systems in place for that. Which is not to say that in any closed space, if somebody brings the virus in, there is a possibility. One would ideally like 100% insurance, but to the extent that we can, and that is what the middle seat controversy was initially in the aircraft. But I think the systems are in place, and if you're wearing masks, and I just did a air journey to Kushinagar and back, I think systems are working.
We do hope that systems work, but the fact that I've been interacting with a lot of experts and I've been talking about the post-COVID era, urban mobility, how would COVID-19 change urban mobility for all times to come now?
Well, first of all, we need to define what the post-COVID era is going to be. We are currently facing a situation which, as I said, is unprecedented. It's one of a kind. We are immediately concerned with and the major preoccupation is recovery. You have to recover economic activity, you have to allow people to travel. Look at the Indian economy. If you look at it, dissect the economy, a good 60% plus is services. And mobility is essential to those services. Manufacturing is very important, agriculture is important, but as a percentage of the GDP or percentage contribution to the overall GDP, services is the highest. Now, when you start, both the service provider, those who are resident service providers or those who travel to provide a service, it's a very important part of the economy. It's a lifeline. I think, first of all, we will need to know when the vaccine will be available. The vaccine and its ready distribution to the population, not to a few privileged people, but to people by large, when that vaccine will be ready for mass use, number one. Number two, I am not an expert in health, but I am a member of the group of ministers. I think the time has come for us also to factor in the possibility that this virus, COVID-19, may at some stage be replaced by or be followed by other health challenges which may or may not emerge from the wet markets of a particular country, but which, as a result of the clash and the devastation caused on account of the exploitation of the planet by mankind, there is a constant battle going on. I mean, if you didn't have the kind of toxic carbon emissions or other forms of toxicity, you may not have this problem. But you should now start preparing for a scenario. It could be post-COVID, where maybe we have to address the future of work. Is it necessary for the entire population to be crowding and coming to work, let's say, between 7 to 9 in the morning, where you have millions of people in megapolises? Maybe some functions can be performed equally efficiently, and perhaps in terms of sustainability is concerned, better from where you are. Equally, you may be able to address the future of work in a manner which will give you certain cushions and layers. Also, that some segments of your population are more vulnerable. Therefore, on the Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry, we did Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which was, the title being got by this person who will own. You do affordable rental housing, where people who are migrant workers, they don't need to live in conditions. I mean, this happened when the Industrial Revolution started between 1750 and 1850 in the UK. But we need to look at our stage of development. We need to provide for that. Post-COVID, I think, your health budgets will have to increase. I mean, when I was ambassador in Brazil, India's ambassador to Brazil, I was talking about 3% of GDP devoted to health. Now, and everybody agreed that would be the right thing to do, but then it's a question of resources. Today, I don't need to make an effort on 3%. As a member of the GUM, now people are talking about 5 or 6%. Well, these are the new things which come about. And the post-COVID world, I think, will be a more sensitive and more, certainly in India. I mean, I see the Prime Minister's many initiatives. Yesterday, the street vendor scheme, it's a roaring success. It's been barely around for 2 months, and we've got lakhs, hundreds of thousands of people applying, registering, bank loans being disbursed. I see much more of that happening. But urban transport, since we are on the urban transport segment, Kriti, it is a lifeline, and we'll have to develop that. Because if you don't have urban transport of the efficient kind, I mean the metro, what will happen? You and I will have a temptation to take out our two-wheeler or our four-wheeler, and our roads will be clogged. I mean, I remember the first time I came to the office after the lockdown, and I told my colleagues, I said, I've never seen so many cars parked in Nirman Bhavan, partly because the metro was not functioning. You still see that traffic because the metro is just beginning to absorb its regular customers. Give it till the 12th or the 15th of the month, and I'm sure we will start finding a balance which means safety precautions, social distancing, the wearing of masks, and other systems which the operator has to wear. They will be in place, and as the comfort level rises, but I don't see the kind of very, very concentrated congestion. I don't think we'll be able to countenance that after this, because that is where I think the cutoff comes. Which means what? You maybe have to expand networks, you have to increase services, but you will have maybe place for standing, but you will have to make sure that it's not the, you used to have these pictures when I was a young foreign service officer of bouncers standing outside trains in Japan, and a full compartment, and the bouncer is literally pushing people in, and then they are, packed like sardines inside it. I don't think post-COVID that situation is something that we want to even contemplate.
All right, talking about smart cities, how are these smart cities leveraging technology in this era of pandemic?
Well, on every front. First of all, smart cities ensure that all the known urban services, and even some which were unknown, they're all technologically anchored. water, electricity, smart traffic, garbage, waste disposal. And you have these huge screens in the smart cities which look like, the NASA canvases, where 40, 50 people sitting in front of the screen on computers. They monitor this, and that's how the city operates. It's able to anticipate when there's a problem going to arise somewhere. It's able to make arrangements to deal with that contingency. Well, we have 100 smart cities. Day before yesterday, I was with Yogi ji, the Chief Minister of UP, and I was telling the few people around us, I said, UP has the maximum, that is 10 smart cities. And I remember when the last tranche came, I was on a tour, I think in Goa, and Yogi ji called me. I thought he was going to say thank you that all our 10 cities now, the final tranche has come in. But he was saying, हमारी 7 रह गई हैं, हमें उनका भी करवाना है. So, but this smart city scheme is only for 100 for the entire country. So yesterday when I was with him in Kushinagar, I recalled the story. He said, हमने ये निर्णय कर लिया है, हम अपने आप ही इनको smart city बनवा देंगे. I mean, without this being a center state cooperative effort, the state. That's the demonstrative effect of a smart city. Haryana government is doing it in, I think, Gurugram. Others will do it. You see, once you are able to get a technology demonstrator, once you are able to show that a city which is a smart city in a confined area. Now, Delhi is a huge place, but the smart city is only the NDMC part. Once you can do it, then there will be a premium. Those people who are residents there, they will penalize their own elected representatives, including the urban local bodies, and put the pressure that is required so that they are able to smartify their existence. And I think this is a win-win. When you have a smart city, what does it mean? Let's look at our yojanas. It means the Swachhta part. Swachhta part means other urban amenities. Once you do that, the value of land increases. So everybody is a winner. On the other hand, if you are not able to look at that and you get very low in the ranking, then there is a name and shame element to it, which also acts as a disincentive or an incentive, no matter which way you're looking at it.
All right, now let's shift focus to the civil aviation space. Now, Vande Bharat mission is on the 6th phase, I believe, and we're also negotiating with other countries for air bubbles. What is the latest on that front?
First of all, let me situate Vande Bharat. Vande Bharat started with limited and very specific objectives. That is, when the COVID pandemic hit the world, many of our citizens were stranded in different countries. Some had lost their jobs, some were in deep financial difficulty, some were serving time because they'd violated their local visa regulations, they were out after having served time. I'm giving you a small example. There were others who were just needed to return home for compelling reason. So the first phase of Vande Bharat was based on a demand given to us by the Ministry of External Affairs. 190,000 people of Indian origin or Indian nationals had registered with the Indian missions and posts abroad. So when Jaishankar ji, my colleague and friend, said that we have to do this, and he had already broached the subject with the Prime Minister, and I asked him about numbers, he said 190,000. Kriti, I was skeptical even then. I know as a former Foreign Service officer how many Indians live outside, how many of them are Indian passport holders or Indian origin OCI card holders. And if you accept the basis that there are 25 million, let's say hypothetically, I'm not saying everybody has to travel, but the number would have to be much higher than 1.9. So anyway, we took that 1.9 lakhs with a pinch of salt. We made arrangements to bring people back. Well, I don't know the exact number as of last night, but it's probably over 15 lakhs. कहाँ 2 लाख से कम और कहाँ 15 लाख से अधिक. Touch wood, the arrangements are working very well. You know, we are in many ways not only a robust democracy, but we are also our strongest critics, our own critics, you know. Anything we do, somebody will say, this is not fair, that is not fair. But when you try and explain to them and they understand, look, ideally, when COVID came, you should not have stopped international civil aviation. But look, we were the first country in the world which stopped flights from China. We were one of the earliest countries to introduce thermal screening at airports of passengers coming in. At that time, the dominant narrative was that if you have got COVID, you must be running fever. So the thermal screening would. Today we are in a situation, most people who test positive, they don't show any symptoms or they show symptoms which they themselves don't realize. So now we got RT-PCR tests, etc. So we are evolving the system. Look, till international civil aviation opens, we will need to work this system through a regulated system now, which is bilateral civil aviation agreements or air bubbles, or call you what you like. But I have maintained that international civil aviation can open only when we are sure about how the virus is going to behave. And when I talk about the behavior of the virus, I am acutely conscious of the fact that some countries decided very early in the day that they thought that they had a control on the virus, opened up, and there was a backlash, they had to clamp down. Some places in Europe, holiday resorts opened up, and then again there was a backlash. There were some countries which thought that they did brilliantly because they did not have any lockdown, and those countries have civil war kind of conditions now. So one has to be very careful. So I say the behavior of the virus. Number two, when domestic civil aviation reaches its 50% mark, we were flying 300,000 passengers, 3 lakhs a day prior to COVID. So when we reach 150,000 or 50%, which we'll do very soon, then we'll have an ecosystem. See, international flights come to Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, but the passengers are not of Delhi. The passengers may have to go from here to, Allahabad, Prayagraj, Varanasi, etc. So once you have domestic flights at 50-60%, then an international passenger comes and can easily, in a hub, Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, transfer to this thing. Third issue, the international civil aviation can open when countries ease the restrictions on entry. Now we have a situation, we fly empty planes from here to some countries in the Gulf because those countries are not allowing anyone other than their citizens to come in. So we utilize the empty aircraft to ferry vegetables and then bring our passengers who have to come back. Now these are arrangements which are purely ad hoc, which have been necessitated by the set of circumstances we find ourselves in. But I'm very confident that the number of bubbles will increase. We already have 9 in place. We've approved 13 and we are in the final stages of negotiating. We have countries who say, not bubbles, we want open skies, we want more and more. These are countries interested in our 6 freedom rights. They want to take people from here, take them to there, and there. But the essential defining characteristic of a bubble is, if I give access to the carrier of another country, my own carrier must have access, because GDP is under strain, so we must have an equitable sharing of economic opportunity so that we are in a position to both benefit by it.
You mentioned about domestic travel. Now there's a lot of concern about refund of tickets.
That's been more or less solved. Let me tell you, the matter is before the court. We are very clear. As the Ministry of Civil Aviation, we are saying that if an airline has taken money from a passenger, it must be refunded. There's no go on it. It's a little complicated. Earlier, prior to COVID, you had schemes like Apex. You could book your ticket 60 days, 7 months in advance, anything. And if you did that, you were booking in advance, you got a reduced fare. Now, that's not COVID related. During COVID, we had a lockdown. If any airline, domestic or international, took money when it was not supposed to operate, they have to give it back straight away. There's no issue. Then there came post, when civil aviation has started. There we worked out a system which, look, this is court directed. So let me say very clearly, where I get the impression that most people are on board on it. In any case, I think we're in the final stages. So I think the problem, you see, as airlines begin to earn money, they also have the capacity. And by the way, when you book a ticket, you don't always go to the airline. You go to maybe someone else, and that person has an arrangement with the airline. So you can't, I mean, the airlines tell us, I mean, I don't know what the facts are, but you know, they're not holding the money. It's part of another arrangement. But I think, you know, I'm a pretty good barometer of where the trouble are, because if when there's a real problem, I get trolled. And first I say open flights, open flight. Now when we say there are flights, you want to fly from here to UK, you've got daily flights by carriers of both the countries. You want to travel from here to France, you've got Air France, Air India, Frankfurt, Lufthansa, Air India. If you want to go to USA, Canada. There are some people who say, well, I want to go to place X. But you know, I have to remind them that we didn't have a flight to there even prior to COVID. So what you have to do is to get to a European hub or an African hub and then do your flight. But things change, you know, either the revival of traffic. By the way, I before coming here, I knew I'd be quizzed by you. Our recovery, our rate on domestic civil aviation as a percentage is higher than most countries. If you leave out China and Korea, because they dealt with the virus earlier. But if you look at United States, Europe, as a percentage we're doing it. But of course, US domestic volume is much higher. We were doing 3 lakh before COVID. They were probably doing 9 lakhs per day. But they've reached 30% of the part. And today they're at 300,000 domestic. Our 300,000 would be full, but our percentage today is way beyond 30%. But these are all situations which will develop. I'm very confident that we'll not only get our 100% of pre-COVID traffic back, but we'll go far higher. I think Mr. Goyal has a little worrying to do, because I may take away some of his railway passengers when civil aviation revives.
Fingers crossed, Mr. Puri. And lastly, COVID-19 has disrupted economies globally, particularly civil aviation and real estate. Now, the KV Kamath Committee has submitted a report, 26 sectors for loan restructuring, including civil aviation and real estate. What is the kind of support that we anticipate from the government in these sectors?
Well, support has been forthcoming. I mean, if you look at it right from the beginning, there is what I call sector-specific support, and there is support which is what you would say generally available, where an entrepreneur or a businessman who's either in civil aviation or in this thing, bank loans, moratoriums, rollovers. Look, let me give you some of the defining characteristics of my 2 sectors. In civil aviation, you have a situation where airports had no revenue. Virtually, there are no flights, so there are no revenue. Many of these are privatized airports. They've borrowed money. They depend on charges which they receive when there is activity. They're duty free, etc. Hotels are closed. Airlines were not flying, no revenue. One of the larger airline bosses spoke to me sometime in the end of April, and he asked me, can I proceed on the basis that by till September we will have no revenue stream? And I said, not at all. I expect domestic civil aviation to revive by mid-May. I wasn't too wrong. We revived by 25th May. There's a conversation in April. And I said, by the time we are through September, you will have a fairly large percentage of civil aviation back. We're almost back at 50%. The highest figure I had was 141,000. Look, there's a lot we've done for the civil aviation sector. The Kamath Committee, which you're saying, you know, they've given for 26 separate sectors. As a matter of policy, I never pronounce on what we have recommended, because it's not fair on my senior colleague, the finance minister. She has to take the decision. We are in touch directly with the finance ministry, with the banks, whatever we can do to help. Many of the stakeholders in this have had to borrow money. The airports authority is borrowing money from the market. They also have dues to be paid to them by the airlines. Okay. Now, I would like, and I think we are getting an ecosystem. We brought the GST rate down wherever we came, including on MROs. Aviation turbine fuel, which takes up a particularly high percentage of operating cost, you know, has been kept at a manageable level. When you have diesel and petrol, let's say at 80, units of currency, whatever, and this one is at 40. So that gives you an idea. Equally, we've taken a number of steps, and I'm in print. I've written articles saying what all we've done. Same applies to the sector of construction. Let me give you a small example. Many of the things we've done, people don't realize the significance also. Rationalizing airspace. Sometimes if you wanted to fly between point A and point B, let's say from Mumbai to Srinagar, because of Air Force and airspace regulation, you had to take a circuitous route. I just did a study yesterday and I shared it with my boss. We find that the total amount of saving that has been coming on 12 of the sectors is huge. Who gets that saving? The airline gets the saving. Okay? When you keep it. Now, I think some of the discussion which we don't hear very much about, I heard Mr. Kamath say that, maybe we don't need certain kinds of steps, but you need other kinds of steps. We are in the process of discussing this. I have regular meetings with my friends in Naretco and Credai. We are, there are little things we are doing. There is more that we would like to do, but as I keep saying, this is work in progress.
All right, Minister, thank you so much for this candid conversation.
Thank you.